This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayechi, and we are Be'ezus Hashem holding at the 12th and final Parsha of Sefer Bereshis, Parshas Vayechi. We're in the middle of a Perek Mem Zayin, Pasuk Chav Ches. So Parshas Vayechi very much is a continuation of the end of Parshas Vayigash. What happened in the end of Parshas Vayigash? Yaakov Avinu, b'shivim nefesh, went to settle in Mitzrayim. The primary reason that he went to Mitzrayim was he heard that Oid Yosef Chai. He heard his beloved son Yosef was alive. Obviously, he wanted to see him. But really, it was a little more than that, because when Yaakov was en route to Mitzrayim, he stopped off in Beersheba, and when he was in Beersheba, he had a dream. And in his dream, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to him and he told him that I want you to not just go to Mitzrayim and see Yosef, but I actually want you to settle in Mitzrayim. I want you to stay there. As a matter of fact, I am going to bring you out of Mitzrayim when the time is right, but for the foreseeable future, Anus al pi adibur, I want you to remain in Mitzrayim. And the pasuk says that Yosef, using his chachma, was able to find a large plot of land that was in Mitzrayim, but at the same time somewhat removed from the culture of Mitzrayim. It was in the land of Goshen. That's where Yaakov settled, and the pasuk says, "Vayechi Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim." Very, very last pasuk in Parshas Vayigash, be'eretz Goshen, vaye'achazu ba, vayifru vayirbu ma'od. Either way, very much as a continuation of that last pasuk, Parshas Vayechi begins. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as rishon. Yaakov Avinu lived in Mitzrayim for 17 years. Vayehi yemei Yaakov shnei chayav sheva shonim va'arbam u'ma'ashon. And if you tally up the entire life of Yaakov Avinu, the 17 years that he lived in Mitzrayim, and all the years that he had lived prior, Yaakov Avinu lived for 147 years. Now, the truth is, it almost feels like Yaakov Avinu just passed away in the first pasuk of Parshas Vayechi, which would mean that the next pasuk in Parshas Vayechi is going to pick up the day after the Ptira of Yaakov Avinu. But we know that really Parshas Vayechi is to the contrary. It's the story of the final moments, the final days, final weeks of the life of Yaakov Avinu. So really, this pasuk's a little bit of a header, but really, we're going to go a little back in time now. Not a lot, but a little bit back in time, and we're going to talk about Achris Yomov Shel Yaakov Avinu. It's interesting, the Svarim HaKadoshim say, Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as rishana. It doesn't say, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as rishana, Vayogor Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as rishana. It says, Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as rishana. Now, all those words are synonyms of each other, but at the same time, the Svarim HaKadoshim say that the word Vayechi has a little bit of a deeper meaning. It's Miloshin Chios. Yaakov Avinu lived 17 years in Mitzrayim, but these were full years. He lived a chayim aruchim for those 17 years. His life was infused with chiyus. And this was really in contrast to the trials and tribulations that is very much the story of Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu, from a very young age, literally in his mother's womb, was already fighting with Esav. Ultimately, he was a fugitive. He had to hide in Yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever for 14 years. He had to spend years of his life, 20 years, by Lavan, which was very nakishmak. Even when he came back to Eretz Canaan, immediately he had to deal with the Tzara of Dinah. And then Achron Chaviv, he had to deal with the tzara of his beloved Yosef HaTzadik. And Yaakov Avinu's life was a very, very difficult life. But the 17 years that he lived in Mitzrayim, that was Vayechi Yaakov. And it's ironic, because Yaakov lives most of his life in Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael for him was very much niknas b'yisurim. When he lived in Mitzrayim for those 17 years, he had it incredibly, incredibly well, which was really the opposite of the Maisa of a Labanim, of what the story of his offspring was going to be. The Yidden's years in Mitzrayim were going to be very, very challenging. they entered Eretz Yisrael in the times of Yeshua ben Nun with Nisim v'Neflois. But for Yaakov, the story is almost in the reverse. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shvas rishana. Yaakov didn't just live in Mitzrayim for 17 years, but he had an incredible chiyus during those 17 years. Either way, we now pick up the narrative right around the time of Yaakov Avinu feeling that he's getting close to passing away. These are the final moments of the life of Yaakov Avinu. Says the pasuk, "Vayikruvu Yemei Yisrael Namus." Yisrael, as in Yaakov Avinu, felt that his days were numbered. He was getting very, very close to when he was going to leave this world. Vayikru l'vnei of Yosef. So he called his son Yosef. Vayomer lo, and he told him, Simna yodcha tachas yirechi. I request of you to place your hand underneath my yerech. V'asisa imadi chesed ve'emes, and you should do for me a chesed shel emes. What is that chesed shel emes? Al nasik beredi b'Mitzrayim. Please make sure that when I die, I am not buried in Mitzrayim. V'shachavti im avoisai. I want to be put to rest together with my father and with my grandfather. Unisasani mi Mitzrayim. Thus, I'm asking you to carry me from Mitzrayim. Ukvartani b'kfurasam. Bury me together with them in the Maras Machpelah. Vayomer, and Yosef's response was, Anoichi esa kidvarecha. I'm going to do exactly what you requested of me to do. Vayomer, so Yaakov said, Hishavali, I want you to swear. Vayishavaloi, he swore. Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita, and then Yisrael, Yaakov Avinu, he bowed down al Rosh Hamita. So, the beginning of Achris Yamav Shel Yaakov Avinu are these three psukim. High level, what just happened in these three psukim? Yaakov calls Yosef and he tells Yosef, I'm requesting of you, Al nosik beredi b'Mitzrayim. Where do I want to be buried? V'shachavti im avoisai, ukvartani b'kfurasam. That's where I want to be buried. Yosef said, of course, Tata, if that's what you want, I'm Mishnah Melech, I can make things like this happen. I'll absolutely make it happen. But Yaakov Avinu wanted more than just Tzizugin and Liebhoven. He told him, Simna Yodcha Tachas Yirechi, which of course is the way Shvuos were done, Benekitas Chayfetz, and he Shavali, I want you to swear, Vayishavaloi, and he went ahead and he swore. So a few things. First of all, the Ramban says that why was it that Yaakov Avinu wanted Yosef to swear? It almost sounds like from the Psukim that he doesn't trust them. Yosef says, Anoichi esa kidvarecha. What does Yaakov say? Hishavali. I don't want you to just tell me. I want you to swear. Vayishavaloi. And then afterwards, he was already okay. So says the Ramban, Chalila to think that Yaakov Avinu didn't trust Yosef. Of course he trusted Yosef. However, Yaakov was a chacham she'ena b'roshai. And he was a little bit concerned that maybe Paroi was going to put up a little bit of a fight. And Paroi was going to tell Yosef that I would rather Yaakov be buried here in Mitzrayim. Yaakov was a very, very big deal, even amongst the Egyptians. And for Paroi to have Yaakov buried in his country was a tremendous kavod. He believed it was going to bring tremendous bracha. Remember, when Yaakov came to Mitzrayim, it brought bracha. According to Rashi, the hunger stopped. According to everybody, the Nilus began to rise. So there was a tremendous shefa that came into Mitzrayim as soon as Yaakov came. And as a result, for sure, Paroi is going to vote in favor of Yaakov's corpse remaining in Mitzrayim. So to preempt that, what did Yaakov do? He told Yosef, I want you to swear. Why is that going to change anything? Because he knew Paroi was a decent guy. We've mentioned this a few times. And as a result, he trusted that Paroi would honor the oath of Yosef. And to the extent that Yosef already swore, now Paroi is not going to put up a fight. So he's not making Yosef swear because he doesn't trust Yosef 100%. When you learn the sugyas of Nedarim and Shvuas, that's usually why a person would make a neder, why a person would make a shvua. That's very much not what's going on over here. What's going on over here is that he is a little bit concerned about Paroi, and to preempt Paroi, he went and he told him, I want you to swear. That's the first ara. The second ara is, why did Yaakov make this request of Yosef? Why didn't he make it of Ruvain and Shimon and Levi of Yehuda? Why did he make it from any of the other brothers? So that's easy. It's a Rashi and Chumash. The reason he reached out to him is because he understood that he was someone that was able to make it happen. And because he was someone that was able to make it happen, so it made sense that he should be the person that we should make this request of. The pasuk says, "Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita." After Yosef swore, Benekitas Chayfetz. So Yaakov Avinu was very, very pleased. He bowed down al Rosh Hamita. So what does it mean by Yishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita? So Rashi says two pshatim. One pshat Rashi says is al Rosh Hamita, his head was facing the top of the bed. Hafach atzmi l'tzad hashchina. Mikan amru she'hashchina l'mayla mirashoysav shel chayla. It's a Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, that a chayla has a special connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Shechina is literally l'mayla mirashoysav. That means if somebody goes to be mavaka chayla, there's certain halachas that he has to observe. That's the Gemara in Shabbos, because of the fact that he's in the presence of the Shechina. Now, where exactly is the Shechina relative to the chayla? It's l'mayla mirashoysav. So Yaakov Avinu bows down. What direction is he going to bow down in? He's bowing down in the direction of the Shechina. Makes a lot of sense. He's giving Gaidat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where is the Shechina? It's al Rosh Hamita. That's why Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita. Rashi says another pshat. Rashi says al Rosh Hamita is not a place. It's not geographically. It's not the physical location. It's not the direction that Yaakov was bowing towards, but rather al Rosh Hamita was the reason that he bowed down. The reason Yaakov Avinu bowed down was al shahoisa mitasoi shlema, because he was zoicha that mitasoi shlema, that all his children turned out to be tzaddikim. Even Yosef, says Rashi, who was a melech, and he was nishba bein hagoyim, he was oimed b'tzidkoi. And for whatever reason, at this moment, Yaakov felt this hisayrus, and he was inspired to give Eidat HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's bowing down. Why? Because his mita, his bed, literally was shleima. So Vayishtach Yisrael al Rosh Hamita is not the direction, but rather it's the reason, it's the cause, it's the tam, why it is he's bowing down. The Rashbam, in Pshutei Shal Mikra, says, I think what the pasuk means, Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita, is Yaakov was very old. He was very frail. Couldn't get off the bed. And as a result, when he bowed down, he didn't bow down on the floor, which is where a person would usually bow down, but he bowed down al Rosh Hamita. Couldn't get off the bed. And this is just another way that the Torah is making the point that Yaakov Avinu is already towards the end of his life. He's lying in bed. He's so shvach. He wants to bow down now to give hoidah. He can't even get off his bed. Vayishtachu Yisrael, not in the direction al Rosh Hamita, not because mitase was shlema, but literally al Rosh Hamita, on the top of the bed, as opposed to on the floor, which is where people usually would go kairim. And the reason is simply because of the fact that he was so shvach. So again, what's Yaakov Avinu's request? His request is that he wants to be buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. V'shachafti im avoisai, u'nesasani mi Mitzrayim, u'kvartani b'kfurasam. Now, why did he want to be buried there? Last point. So, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says three reasons. Number one, because Yaakov Avinu understood that if somebody's buried in Chutz La'aretz, eventually his guf is going to turn into kinim. It's going to turn into lice. Additionally, by Tchias HaMesim, the Meisei Chutz La'aretz have to go through the tsar, the pain of the Gilgal Mechilas, they have to go through tunnels, as opposed to people that live in Eretz Yisrael don't have to deal with the Tsar Gilgal Mechilas. And finally, he was worried that the Egyptians would make him into a deity. They would make him into a getchka. They would make him into Avodah Zarah. But that's Pashut, a mikra yotzim itei pshutai. Rashi's just giving us additional reasons. But the Pashut pshat is, v'shachafti em avoisai. He wanted to be buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. The story of Ma'aras HaMachpelah goes back to the beginning of Parshas Chayesara, where Avram Avinu bought from Ephron for Arba Meir Shekel Kesef Ovel HaSoicher, the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. That's very much where he wanted to be buried. That's where he was buried together with Sarah. That's where Yitzchak and Rivka was buried. That's where Leah was buried. And Kemuvin, that's where Yaakov wanted to be buried. What we learned in Parshas Chayesara, we spoke out from Rabbeinu Bechaya, that Rabbeinu Bechaya says that even though the chosen city amongst Eretz Yisrael, something we spoke a lot about on the Yarchi Kala, is Yerushalayim, but when it comes to being buried, the chosen city in the entire world is the city of Hebron. Shekala cover Sham, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, Nafshoy mischaberes lamayla be'ir elikim im arba machne shchina v'loy lechinam chamdua avos ha'olam. It wasn't exist that all the avos so badly wanted to be buried there. Ela shem yisham zoichos haneshamos lehischaber l'shrosham shu kisei hakovin, and that's the Soid of Kiryas Arba Hi Hebron. This is all going on, Rabbeinu Bechayim, beginning of Parshas Chayesara. So of course, Rashi is giving us reasons why he doesn't want to be buried in Egypt, maybe. But at the end of the day, Yaakov Avinu wants to be buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Why? V'shachavti em avoisai Kvartani bikfurasam, to be buried in Hebron, which is the place that Chamdua Avay Sa'olam to be buried. This was Yaakov Avinu's request. He made it of Yosef because Yosef was the one that was able to execute something like this. And Yosef told him, I'll do it. And he didn't just tell him he'll do it. He swore Benekitas Chayfetz. Either way, some time passed from this episode. And someone came and told Yosef. Rashi says, who was the someone? It was Ephraim. Ephraim had a Chavrusa Shaf together with Yaakov. And he went back and he told Yosef the following: your father's sick. He's very, very sick. I think this is the end. It's time. Everyone has to gather together. So Yosef, when he took his two sons with him, Es Menashe ve'es Ephraim, so a shliach came and he told Yaakov, your son Yosef is coming. So Yisrael, Yaakov Avinu, with his final strength, Vayeshev al Amita, he made himself strong and he sat down on the bed. Vayomer Yaakov Yosef. Yaakov now is talking to Yosef. He tells him, Kel Shakai nire elai beluz be'eretz Canaan. You should know Kel Shakai, Kadosh Baruch Hu, the creator of the world. He appeared to me in Luz, which is in the land of Canaan. And when he appeared to me, he gave me a bracha. And this was the bracha. Vayomer elai, he told me, Hineni mafrecha ve'hir bisicha. Shvatim are going to come from you. And not just that, I'm going to give you this land, the land of Canaan. It's something that's going to belong to you, and it's going to belong to your offspring. So the first thing that Yaakov tells Yosef during this final encounter, the beginning of the parsha was the second to final encounter, but this is the final encounter. What does he tell him? He tells him that when I was in Luz, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to me. He gave me a bracha. He told me, "Hineni mafrecha v'hir bisicha unesaticha lekalamin v'nasati esaretz hazois l'zarecha acharecha achuz hasaylam." Now, the truth is, if we go down memory lane, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had appeared to Yaakov in Luz twice. He appeared to him when Yaakov was leaving Canaan en route to Lavan, to Padan Aram, and then on his way back, he appeared to him again. As a matter of fact, if you look in the pasuk in Parshas Vayishlach, this is Perek Lamed pasuk Tes. The pasuk says, "Vayera Elokim el Yaakov oid bevoya mi Padan Aram vayevarech Osai." What does it mean oid? So Rashi says, "Pam shenis b'makom hazeh echad belechtoi ve'echad b'shuvoi." This was the second time he had appeared to him. Now, when Yaakov Avinu says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to me in Luz and Eretz Canaan vayevarech Osai, is he referring to the first time? Or is he referring to the zweite Mal? The truth is, look at the nusach of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yaakov during those two times, and look at what Yaakov Avinu is quoting right now. If you look at the second time, Vayomer lo Elokim, Ani kel shakai, Prei urevei, goy ukahal goyim yemimecha, umlachem michalatzecha yetzeu, v'sa'oretz asher nosati la'Avram u'liyitzchak l'cha etnenu u'lezarecha acharecha etein esa'oretz. It's almost verbatim what Yaakov Avinu tells Yosef right now. So Yaakov Avinu quotes what the Eibishter told him, Pam Shnia, the second time that he was in Luz. That's when he was going from Padan Aram, heading back to the land of Canaan. This is the first thing that he tells him. Here's the second thing. He says, now, the two sons that you had in Mitzrayim, before I myself came here, Lihaim, they're going to belong to me. Ephraim and Menashe, Keruven v'Shimon Yili. Just like Reuven v'Shimon are my sons, Ephraim and Menashe are going to be my sons as well. Then he continued and said, any children, however, that you had or will have after I already arrived in Mitzrayim, those children are not mine. Those children are going to belong to you. And when it comes time to inherit Eretz Canaan, they're going to inherit the land together with their brothers. So the second thing that Yaakov tells Yosef during this very, very momentous encounter was, the immortal words, Ephraim Menashe Keruven v'Shimon Yili. However, not lihem, al shem achayim yikaru b'nachalasam. So, what's happening over here? A few things. First of all, the Ramban Ba'aricho says that it sounds to me from these psukim like Yosef HaTzadik had more than just two sons. Everyone knows Yosef had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. I don't know. If Yaakov Avinu was talking about the Shnei Necha Hanoiladim L'cha Be'eretz Mitzrayim Ad Boyei Lechem Mitzrayim, and then the Umayladetcha Shayladetcha Achareim L'cha Yiyu, it sounds like there's two sets of children. There's the children that were born prior to Yaakov Avinu arriving, and 17 years have passed. There's the children that were born afterwards. And the Ramban says that even though it's not muchach just from the taich of the words that Yosef really had additional sons, because it could be means children that you're going to have in the future. But says the Ramban, if Yaakov Avinu said those words, it's impossible that those words left the mouth of Yaakov Avinu larik, and for sure they would have to be manifest in a real way. Avtocha from Yaakov Avinu, just a plitas peh of Yaakov Avinu. It's impossible that something that comes out of the mouth of Yaakov Avinu wouldn't be Niskayim. So if those words emerge, there's no question to me, says the Ramban, that Yosef HaTzadik had more than just two sons. He didn't just have Ephraim and Manasseh, he had sons in addition to that. Okay, now what exactly do these psukim even mean? I mean, we know these words, Ephraim and Manasseh, Keruven, V'Shimon, Yiyuli. But if you look at the psukim, it's even more than that. It's as if I'm taking them for myself. It's only the children you're going to have afterwards. Those children are going to belong to you. But what does it even mean? What is the taich of Ephraim and Manasseh? Keruven v'Shimon Yili. So I'm going to tell you what the Ramban says. Ba'arichos gedoyla. Really, all the Rishonim say this. And this is something that we all know, but sometimes we forget where to put it in the psukim. And that is, who was Yaakov Avinu's bechar? Yaakov Avinu's bechar was Ruvain. It was Ruvain. But Ruvain lost the bechara. Right? It's one of the themes of Sefer Bereshis. Esau was the bechar, and then Yaakov gets the bechara. Ruvain was really supposed to be the bechar, just based on the fact that he was Paterechem. So he's supposed to be the bechar. But Ruvain lost the bechara. The bechara was taken from Ruvain, it was given to Yosef. You know how we know that? How do we know that? It's a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim Aleph, Perikei pasuk Aleph. The pasuk says, "Ubnei Ruvain bechar Yisrael, ki hu bechar." Ruvain was the bechar. But because of the Maisa with Bilah, Nitna b'chayrasai lebnei Yosef ben Yisrael. The bechayr was taken away from Ruvain and it was given to Yosef. So it's a pasuk in Divrei Kabbalah. It's a mefurish pasuk. That who was ultimately the bechar? The bechar became Yosef. When did Yosef become the bechar? This second. That's what just happened in these two psukim. Okay, so where do you see that Yosef is becoming the bechar? It's very simple. Says the Ramban, because what's the halacha of a bechar? A bechar gets pish. That's what a bechar gets. What Yaakov Avinu told Yosef right now was that Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be like Reuven and Shimon. Meaning, I'm going to count your two sons as if they're my two sons. Now, with regards to what? So it's not mefurish in the pasuk. And look at Rashi, there's a lot going on over here. But says the Ramban, the children you're going to have afterwards are going to be yours. Those children, when it comes to inheriting the land, they're just going to be like, I don't know, any one of your children. As opposed to as opposed to Ephraim and Manasseh, when it comes to Nachlasam, they're not going to be treated like your children. They're going to be treated like my children. In other words, the land of Canaan is going to be divided amongst my children. So Reuven's going to get, and Shimon's going to get, and Levi's going to get, and Yehuda's going to get, and Yisachar's going to get. And when it comes to Yosef, you're going to get two chalakim. Your two sons are going to be like my two sons. You're going to get a double portion. That is the din of a bechar. A bechar gets pishnayim. It's a pasuk in the Torah. So the taich of Ephraim and Manasseh, Keruven v'Shimon Yiyuli, we know all the Chumash Torah. It's all beautiful. It's fire. But the taich of Ephraim and Manasseh, Keruven v'Shimon Yiyuli, is that you're going to be zoicha to a pishnayim. At this moment, Mamish ba'achris Yomov, Yaakov Avinu went, he took the bechayra from Ruvain, and he transferred it over. He gave it to Yosef, and that's the taich of Ephraim and Manasseh, Keruven v'Shimon Yili. The Rishonim speak out that if you understand that, again, it's obvious, but if you understand that, that's the hemshech of the pasuk right before that. Because what was the first thing that Yaakov told Yosef? He told him that when I was in Luz, in Canaan, Kodesh Baruch Hu gave me a bracha. And he told me, Hineni mafrecha v'hir bisicha, u'nesaticha l'kalamim, v'nosati es ha'aretz hazois l'zaracha acharecha chuz ha'soilom. He promised me the land of Canaan, and he told me that really the haftach of Canaan is going to play itself out, not so much with you, it's going to play itself out with your children. That means I have this Yerusha, I have this heirloom that I'm able to bequeath over to my children and grandchildren. And achuz ha'soilom, it's the land of Canaan. I'm telling you right now, you're getting pishnayim of that. That's the hakdama of the bracha that Yaakov Avinu got in laws, that I'm going to have offspring, and the offspring are going to get as ha'aretz hazois, as an achuz ha'soilom. I now am the bailam on this gift. I can decide exactly how it's going to be distributed. There's a din that a bechar gets pishnayim. The bechar is supposed to be Ruvain ben Leah. I'm switching it instead to Yosef ben Rachel. Yosef, you're the one that's going to be the bechar. You're getting the pishnayim. Where's the pishnayim going to be manifest? It's going to be manifest through your two children, Ephraim and Menashe. Now, what if I have more children? No, that's it. You're only getting pishnayim. The other children are al shem achayim, yikaru b'nachalasim. Oh, the Ramban says the words other children came out of the mouth of Yaakov Avinu must be these other children. Say they're geshmak. But the bottom line is, in terms of what's going on here in this second part of this parsha, it's al shem achayim, yikaru b'nachalasim. It's Ephraim and Menashe, Ruven and Shimon, Yuli. Yosef Atzadik is becoming the bechar. Now, there's a big kasha on this, and this is something that we've spoken about in the raid over the years, Be'ez Hashem, and that is there's a lav in the Torah to do what Yaakov Avinu just did. What Yaakov Avinu just did is one of the Taryag mitzvahs. It says in the Torah, Lo yuchal levaker, that if someone has two wives, Ahuva and Asnua, and the Bechar is from the Snua, you're not allowed to decide one day that instead of the Ben Asnua being the Bechar, I want the Ben Ahuva to be the Bechar. And it sounds like this is precisely to the T what Yaakov Avinu did. It sounds like Yaakov Avinu was Mekayim, this loisase, Bechol, Pitchifkis, right? Exactly the way you're supposed to do it. Or not supposed to do it, right? He literally took the Bechira from Ruvain, Ben Leah Hasnua, and gave it to Yosef, Ben Rachel, or Ahuva. The Rechaim HaKadosh asks this kasha right here. The Kamel, Kulmas, and Nishtabru on this kasha, not for now. Here comes the third, and maybe the most famous thing, that Yaakov Avinu tells Yosef during this final encounter, and that is what's known as the Va'ani. By the way, the whole Va'ani is one pasuk in hindsight. Va'ani says, Yaakov Avinu, B'voyim mi Padan, when I was coming from Padan Aram, heading to Canaan, Meisal I Rachel be'eretz Canaan baderech. My beloved wife, Rachel, she died in the land of Canaan, baderech, on the road. Ba'oid kivras eretz lava yafrasa. And we were not even that far away from arriving in Ephrat, in Ephras. And I buried her on the road to Ephras. He Beis Lachem, which is Beis Lachem, which of course is where Rachel Imenu is buried. So the next thing that Yaakov Avinu tells Yosef is that you should know, when we were coming from Padan Aram, my wife died, Rachel, and I buried her on the side of the road. So, a few things. First of all, why in the world did Yaakov Avinu feel that he needed to tell this to Yosef, and why now? So Rashi and the Ramban and all the Rishonim say, it's very simple. Rashi says, let's see it inside. I'm being matriach you right now to take me to Canaan. Right, that was the shvuah that Yosef HaTzadik made right at the beginning of the parsha. So you're probably wondering, you're probably thinking in your head, I don't understand. Practice what you preach. You're asking me, you have this big ask, this big request, can you please carry me and take my corpse? It's not an easy thing to do. You didn't do this for my mother. I should do for you what you didn't do for my mother. It's that feeling, that sensitivity that has to be percolating in the mind of Yosef. It's never going to say it. He didn't say it. But at the same time, Yaakov Avinu knows that there's no way in the world that Yosef is not thinking it. And if that's the case, Yaakov Avinu felt that this was something that he had to preempt. So, skipping to the next Rashi, says Rashi, I didn't even bring Rachel into Beis Lechem, to bring her into the land. This is a little bit of a hard Rashi. The Ramban asks, what do you mean? Rachel's buried in Eretz Yisrael. She's buried in Eretz Canaan. What does it mean? I didn't even bring her into Beis Lechem, la'achnisa la'aretz. Yeah, maybe not into Beis Lechem, but la'aretz, the land. Of course, she's buried in the land. Says Yaakov Avinu, I know Yosef that you have feelings about this. You should know that the reason I did what I did was al pi adibur. I wasn't calling the shots. I was following orders. The Eibishter wanted me to do this because Rachel needs to be buried on the side of the road so that one day she will be able to be an Ezra. She'll be able to help and to save her children. Because at some point in the future, the Sarat HaBachim and Nebuchadnezzar is going to send Yidden into Galus. And the Yidden are going to be en route to Bavel, to a bitter Galus. And they're going to pass this road, Mamish, where Rachel's buried. And Yoitzis Rachel al-Kivrod, Rachel's going to go out on her kever. Uboicha, she's going to cry. Umevakeshes aleim rachem, and she's going to daven for Klal Yisrael. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Yirmiyahu said, Kol berama nishma, v'akadosh baruch hu meshiva, and the Eibush is going to answer a tefillah, yesh sachar lefulasech Hashem, v'shavu banam legvulam. So Yaakov Avinu is preempting what's going on in the mind of Yosef HaTzadik. He says, you're asking me to go ahead and do this? How come I didn't do the same thing? The reason I didn't do the same thing, because Rachel Imenu strategically is buried on the side of the road. Because when the Yidden are going to go into Galus in the times of Nevizradan, Yoitzis Rachel al Kivra Ubaycha Umevakeshes Aleim Rachamim Kol Berama Nishma is Rachel Mevaka al Banel, and the Eibush is going to answer the tefillah. Yesh Sachar lefulasech Num Hashem v'shavu banim legvulam. The Ramban adds one obvious knech to what we just mentioned, and that is Yosef has tainus. Yaakov is saying, why? Because I understand. You buried my mother on the side of the road. Why'd you bury her on the side of the road? Now you're asking me to go ahead and take you and schlep you from Mitzrayim to Hebron. That's a huge trip. You didn't do the same thing for my mother. I should do the same thing for you. And besides, Rachel, she's mamish buried on the side of the road. It's not proper. It's not bakovadig. And Yaakov, over here at the end of his life, explained himself. And he said, this is the cheshbon. This is all about Rachel mevaka al banah. The Taina says the Ramban was a little bit deeper than that. The Taina was, where does Yaakov want to be buried? Yaakov wants to be buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Who was buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah? Adam Rishon and Chava, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, and at that point Leah was also buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Yaakov Avinu had two primary wives, Rachel and Leah. And who does he want to be buried next to? He wants to be buried next to Leah. He doesn't want to be buried next to Rachel. And by the way, Yosef now is going to have to take his father, bring him from Mitzrayim all the way to Eretz Yisrael to bury him next to who? Not his mother, bury him next to Leah. That's something that requires some hisnatzlus. It requires an explanation. Yaakov could tell Yosef to do it. Yosef's going to do it all day, every day. But at the same time, he felt that required a little bit of an explanation. And he says the reason that Rachel is not buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah is for a cheshbon. There's a special cheshbon why she's buried there. I'm supposed to be buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, and that's why I'm asking you to bring me there. It's not because of a lack of sensitivity, a lack of love that I had towards my wife, Rachel. Of course I want to be buried next to Rachel. There's a cheshbon why Rachel has to be buried where she's buried. I, for my part, need to be buried with my family, my tata, my zayda was buried, and as a result, take me to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Either way, continuing along. So far, a few things happen, right? Not a lot of psukim, but roiv ha'ichos. There's a lot going on here. The first thing that Yaakov told Yosef was about the bracha that he got the second time that he was in Luz. Second thing was he just took the bechorah from Ruvain and he transferred it over to Yosef. The third thing was the Va'ani. Number 4, Vayar Yisrael es b'nei Yosef. Yisrael saw the sons of Yosef. And he said, Mi Eila, who are they? Now, he knew who Ephraim and Menashe was, but he's very, very, very old. He's literally lying on his deathbed. Vayomer Yosef Elohim. So Yosef told his father, Banayim, these are my sons, Asher Nasam Le'Elikim Bazeh, that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave me Bazeh. What does it mean? Asher Nasam Le'Elikim Bazeh. So Rashi says, Heroli Shtar Erisenu Shtar Ksuba. He showed Yaakov Avinu that the children that he had, again, Yaakov's very old now, so he shows him. You're talking, they've had this conversation once before, right? But he shows him the fact that these children were born in a kosher way. They were born al yidei shtar erisnin and shtar ksuba. Vayomer. So Yaakov Avinu said, Kochaim no elai va'avarchem. Bring them a little bit closer. I want to give them a bracha. The Yisrael kavdom yizoyken. The eyes of Yaakov Avinu were already shvach. It was hard for him to see. Lo yuchal iros. Vayagish noisamelov. So he brought them close to him. Vayishak lem. He kissed them. Vayichabik lem. And he hugged them. The Sephorah says something beautiful, very profound on this pasuk. also a topic of raid bites in the past. And that is, the pasuk says that Yaakov Avinu couldn't see. So because he couldn't see the boy so much, so therefore vayishak lehem vayichabek lehem. He says when somebody gives somebody a bracha, it's important that there be some physical touch, some sort of physical connection to allow the bracha to go and to be chal. If Yaakov could have seen Ephraim and Menashe properly, he would have looked at them, and through his re'iyah, there would have been some chibur, some connection, and that's the way he would have imparted the bracha. But being that ve'eni Yisrael kavdu mizoikin lo yuchal eros, so therefore vayishak lahem vayichabek lahem, that was the way he connected to them. Vayom Yisrael Yosef, Yisrael Yaakov then tells Yosef, Ra'oi panecha lo filalti. He says, I have to be honest with you. I never dreamed that I would even see you again. V'hinei hera oisi elikim games arecha. And I was zeicha not only to see you, but I was zeicha to see your children and your grandchildren. How many Holocaust survivors had this hergish? Ra'oi panecha lo filalti. V'hinei hera oisi elikim games arecha. V'yoytze Yosef oisam me'im berkov. So Yaakov Avinu just hugged and he kissed Ephraim and Menashe. He's sitting on his bed, right? Vayechi al amita, if you remember, that's right at the beginning of this part of the parasha. And presumably they're like in between his knees, like they're very close to him. So Yosef removes them from within his knees. And then out of respect, Yosef HaTzadik bows down to Yaakov. And now Yosef takes his sons and he brings them back to Yaakov. Now again, why is he bringing them to him? Because kochim na'olai v'avarchim, right? That's what Yaakov had requested. Yaakov had requested, I want to give them a bracha. Now he didn't give them the bracha yet. What he did was, he hugged them and he kissed them and he remarked, but the bracha itself he didn't give. So before the bracha, Yosef goes and he takes them out, brings them back, and manipulates exactly how they're standing. So what's this manipulation? So we all know this. He took Ephraim, put him on his right. He's facing Yisrael, he's facing Yaakov, so he would be to the left of Yaakov. And then he took Menashe, put him on his left. He's facing Yaakov, so it would be to the right of Yaakov. And he brought them back. Some of Parshas say that it sounds like from the pasuk that initially when Ephraim and Menashe were in front of Yaakov, they were in the reverse order. He hugged them, he kissed them. They were in the reverse order, and Yosef didn't want that Ephraim should be to the right of Yaakov and Menashe to the left. He wanted it to be the other way around. So it's for that reason, Vayoytze Yosef oisam me'im berkov, and then he brought them back. Meaning, if they were in the right order the first time, he's taking them out, he's bringing them back. Like, what's this all about? Now, could be the reason he took them out was vayishtachu la'apavartza. He wanted to bow down. He's not going to bow down to his kids. He wants to bow down to his father out of respect. So he removes them and then he puts them in, and now he's just being careful to make sure they're in the right order. So it's not 100% clear in the pasuk, but I've seen some learn it this way, some learn it the other way. The bottom line is vayagashelov. Now he puts them in the order where Ephraim is to the right of Yosef, which means to the left of Yaakov. Menashe is to the left of Yosef, which means he's to the right of Yaakov. Now, why did Yosef want them to be in this order? It's very simple, because Menashe was the Bechar, Ephraim was number 2, and the Bechar gait of the rechte zat, right? Obviously, this is the way it's supposed to be. Stating that, Yisrael went and he took his right hand, Vayoshes al rosh Ephraim. He put it on the head of Ephraim, who was to his left. For what sar? Even though he was the younger one. Vesmoile al rosh Menashe. He took his left hand and he put it on the head of Menashe, who was to his right. Sike les yadov. He used chachma. Sike's miloshen Seichel, he used chachma with his hands, ki Menashe bechar. And the reason he had to do that was because Menashe was the bechar, hence Menashe was to his right, but he didn't want his right hand to be on Menashe, he wanted his right hand to be on Ephraim. Meaning, if Menashe was not the Bechar, then he could have just done it the regular way. He wouldn't have to be a Sikelas Yadav. But because Menashe is the Bechar, Memeli's on the right, and he doesn't want his right hand to be a Menashe, he wants it to be on Ephraim, that forced him to be Sikelas Yadav. Either way, Vayivarach es Yosef. Now Yaakov Avinu goes and he gives a bracha to Yosef. Remember, he said, Kochem no alai v'avarchim, I want to give a bracha to the kinderlich. But he didn't give the bracha to the kids, he gave the bracha to Yosef. Vayoymar, and he said, Ho Eloikim, asher etzhalchu avoisai lefon of Avram Yitzchak. Eloikim, who's Eloikim? Elokim is the creator of the world, whom my father Yitzchak and Zayd Avram worshipped. Elokim, Who's Elohim? Who's been taking care of me since I'm young? Mamish adayim hazeh. Hamalach hagoyel oisli mikol ra. Yivarech esanu arav yikarvem shemi v'shem avoyse Avram v'Yitzchak v'yidgu l'roi b'kerev ha'aretz. And this is the bracha that Yaakov Avinu gives to Yosef. We're going to get back to this. Vayar Yosef. Yosef saw ki Yoshes Yaviv yad yamina al rosh Ephraim. Yosef saw what Yaakov Avinu had done. How sikelas yadav, right? He did a flipperoo with his hands. Vayera be'inav, and he was a little disturbed. Vayismoich yad aviv lahasaraisa. So Rashi says, what does it mean vayismoich? Vayismoich literally means to support. But what he did was he lifted Yaakov's hand. But Yaakov was so frail, so he had to support it in midair. So he lifted first. After he lifted vayismach yad aviv lahasaraisa, right, to remove it from the head of Ephraim, me'al rosh Ephraim, and he put it on rosh Menashe. And then Yosef told his father, Lo yichei navi, ki zeh ha'bechar, sim yemidcha al roshai. Right? Why are you doing sikelas yadav? Maybe you think that I put them in the reverse order. No, I put them in the right order. So you don't have to be a sikelas yadav. Vayimai naviv, another vayimai. Vayomer, and Yaakov said, Yodati b'nei Yodati. He says, oh, my entire son. I know. Ki hu yir la'am v'gam hu yigdal. As a matter of fact, I know that Gamhu, so too Menashe is going to be great. But his younger brother Ephraim is going to be even greater than him. And his offspring are going to be very famous. And as a result, I see into the future. I know Baruch HaKodesh that Ephraim is going to be greater than Menashe, and it's for that reason he has to get the Ikka Bracha. I'm putting my right hand on Ephraim, and that's why I'm putting my left hand on Menashe. What does it mean? Yodati b'ni Yodati, Gamhu Yila. Says Rashi, Sha'asid Gidoin Lotzeis Mimenu. The Yaakov Avinu said, I know there's going to be an Einokol Menashe whose name is going to be Gidoin. Sha'kadosh Baruch Hu Oisa Nes Al Yadoi. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to perform a great miracle through him. He's great. However, Achav HaKotin Yigdol Mimenu. You know who's going to come from the younger brother Ephraim? Yeshua ben Nun. She'asid Yeshua lotzeis mimenu sheyanchel es haaretz v'yilami Torah Yisrael. I saw a Meir Soloveitchik in the Shiurim makes the obvious diak, and that is that Yaakov Avinu was teaching us that Yeshua ben Nun, who was Malamed Torah Yisrael, was more chashiv than Gideon, who was the Geroisa Bal Moifis, and that was the lesson that Yaakov Avinu was saying over here. And Yaakov Avinu was saying, Ephraim is going to have Yeshua, the Malamed Torah Yisrael. Moif Sima Gevaldig, aber es kommt nicht zu lernen Gemura, to learn in the Heilige Torah. That was the oimik of Yodati b'ni Yodati. Either way. Then Yaakov Avinu went and he gave them a bracha. He gave a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe as well. On that day. And what did he say? Leimar b'cha Yivarech Yisrael leimar. That when someone's going to want to bench their children, you know they're going to bench their children? They're going to say, Yisimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'chem Menashe. Vayosem es Ephraim l'fnei Menashe, and he placed Ephraim before Menashe. What does that mean? Yisimcha Elokim Ephraim first, and Menashe second. So you see that in the Bracha, Rashi says he went ahead and he went first. Vayom Yisrael Yosef. Then Yaakov told Yosef, "Hine anochi meis. I am about to die. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu be with you. You should be zeicha to return to Eretz Canaan. I've given you an extra portion over your brothers. Extra portion from this that I took from the Amori. How did I take it? Becharbi ubekashi. So this pasuk over here is also a little bit of a hard pasuk. Ayin b'rishonim. The way Rashi learns in one pshat, and this is also the pshat of the Ramban, is this is really a chazara of what Yaakov had already told Yosef, and that is Ephraim, Menashe, Reuven, V'Shimon, and Yuli, that instead of Reuven being the Bechar, you're going to be the Bechar. What he's telling him is Vanino sati l'cho shchem echad alachecha. An extra tiling, right? You're getting an extra portion. So everyone gets one portion, but you get pishnayim. And because you get pishnayim, you end up getting two portions. Two portions of what? Of Eretz Canaan. Two portions from this, ashalokachti, not that I took, says the Ramban, but that's from which I shall take. Miyadu Amoiri, the Amoiri, who lives in the land of Canaan. We're going to take it b'charbi b'kashti in the times of Yeshua ben Nun. So it sounds a little bit like he's giving a shchem echad from something that he had already taken. But it's really ashalokachti in the future tense that one day we're going to conquer Canaan and you're going to end up with an extra portion. That's the pishnayim you're going to get. Rashi's other pshat is that the shchem echad is referring to the city of Shechem. And this was something that Yaakov had already gotten. Ashalokachti miyadu amoiri b'charbi b'kashti. But Rashi, I don't understand. Yaakov Avinu wasn't involved in Shechem, right? Who was involved in Shechem? It was Shimon and Levi. Where does Yaakov Avinu get involved? So Rashi says, you see from here that Chaga Yaakov claimed Milchama Kenegdam, the Yaakov Avinu also got involved. Rashi says it earlier in the Parshas as well. But the bottom line is, it must be that Yaakov was somewhat involved. That's Asher Lokachti, I myself took. Miyado Amoiri Becharbi Bekashti. We know that Targum Unkelis, B'tzloisi Ubevausi. We have red bites on that. Not for now. But either way, this concludes. We're already holding Ravi. We're mamish moving along. The first portion of Parshas Vayechi. So let's first do a super duper high level recap. So Parshas Vayechi really begins with the very, very end of Yaakov Avinu's life. Specifically, Yaakov Avinu's interactions with Yosef at the very, very end of his life. And it's divided into two groups. The first is the first 4 psukim of the Torah, where Yaakov Avinu gets Yosef to swear b'nekitas chayfetz, al nosik b'reini b'mitzrayim, you should do with me a chesed shalem. That's the first shorter part of this narrative. The next part is that Yosef HaTzadik is told that Yaakov is very, very not well. It's already ot. So Yaakov immediately takes his 2 sons, Ephraim and Menashe. They tell Yaakov that Yosef is coming. He uses his last strength that he has. He sits up on the bed and he starts talking to Yosef and he says, first thing he tells him is that when I was in Luz, second time, Kadosh Baruch Hu appeared to me and he told me, which means that my offspring are going to one day inherit the land of Canaan. I want you to know that even though Reuven's my Bechar, you're going to be my Bechar. Ephraim and Menashe, Kiruven v'Shimon Yuli, and as a result, you're going to get a double portion in that land of Canaan. The next thing he tells him is the Va'ani. He says, you're probably wondering, I'm going to make you now be matriach to take me to Aras Machpelah. I didn't do the same thing for your mother. And by the way, I want to be buried next to Leah, not next to Rachel. It's with a cheshbon. It was al pi hadibur, because Rachel mevaka al banel. The next thing he says is, I want to give the kids a bracha. Bring them a little bit closer to me. Vayishak lohem, vayichabek lohem. And he says, I want to give them a bracha. And he goes ahead and he gives a bracha. But first, he gives a bracha to Yosef, and then afterwards he gives a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe. What was the bracha that he gave to Yosef? It's 2 psukim. That's the Vayevorech es Yosef hayomer. After he gives a bracha to Yosef, he gives a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe. What's the bracha that he gives them? B'cha yivarech Yisrael leimar yisimcha alekim ke'Ephraim v'chemenashe. I saw in the shiurim from Rameir Alevi Soloveitchik, he said that he remembers when he was a little boy, so the Tata, the Briskerov, used to ask the kids questions on Chumash. So he said one of the questions that the Briskerov used to like to ask the kids is, what was the bracha that Yaakov gave Ephraim and Menashe? And he said he expected us to always say, Hamalach hagoy Eloisim mikol ra yivarech es hanarim. And the Tata used to say, Satois. That was Vayevorech es Yosef hayomer. The bracha that he gave Ephraim and Menashe was B'cha yivarech Yisrael leimar yisimcha lekim ke Ephraim v'chemenashe. So let's focus on the bracha that he gave Yosef. Halikim asher esalchu avoisei lefanav Avram v'Yitzchak. Halikim haroya oisim yoidei ad hayom hazeh. Hamalach hagoy loisim mikol ro yivarech es hana'arim v'yikorev v'hem shemi v'shem avoisei Avram v'Yitzchak v'yidgu l'roiv b'kerev ha'aretz. So, first of all, it doesn't sound like he's giving a bracha to Yosef, right? Whatever these words even mean, it sounds like he's giving a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe. Vayevorech es Yosef, right? Hence the trick question of Mar and Agriz. But it sounds like this is a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe. It doesn't sound like it's a bracha to Yosef. So all the Rishonim say, the Ramban, the Rashbam, the Cheskuni, all the Rishonim say that the truth is that the bracha was a bracha to Yosef. But birchas habonim is kebirchas ha'av. You want to give a bracha to a father, tell him he's going to have good children. You bench the kids. You bench a father with good kids, birchas habonim is birchas ha'av. So it's true, it's a bracha straight up for the children. But at the same time, that is Vayevorech es Yosef. Benching his children is Vayevorech es Yosef. In other words, He gave a bracha to Yosef and he gave a bracha to Ephraim and Manasseh. Both brachas are negaya Ephraim and Manasseh. They're the subject of both brachas. But in Lumdis, one is a bracha to Yosef via Ephraim and Manasseh, and the other one is a bracha to Ephraim and Manasseh alei. Right? It's Pasha, nothing fancy. That's clearly what's going on over here. These are the two dinim, the two brachas in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi. Now, what does it mean? Ha'elikim ashes alchu avoisai lefanav Avram v'Yitzchak. Ha'elikim haroya oisi me oidi adayim hazeh. So literally, the words mean Yaakov Avinu is calling out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ha'elikim. Who's Elikim? Ashes. What do you mean? The God that my father and my Zayda worshipped. Who's Elikim? He's the Elikim that's Roya Oisi Adayim Hazeh. But Yaakov doesn't even say anything about Elikim. He just says Elikim. I could have just said Elikim. What? Doesn't say anything. Then Hamalach Hagoya Loisi Mikora, the Malach that was Goya Loisi Mikora, Yivarech Hasana Arim. Right? He jumps from Elikim to the Malach, but didn't say anything about Elikim, so it's just not clear. Okay, Pashup Shah, nothing fancy. What exactly is going on over here? Additionally, how do you understand those words? Hamalach Hagoya Loisi Mikora, Yivarech Hasana Arim. Right? These are words that we know in our sleep, literally. What does it mean? Hamalach Hagoya Loisi Mikora, Yivarech Hasana Arim. Yaakov Avinu is suggesting that the Malach should bench the Na'arim. That's the ask. The Malach should bench the Na'arim. The Eibishter should be mashpia. What are you talking about the Malach? Right? How many times have we spoken about the Maral who didn't like Machnisei Rachamim? Because like you're talking to Malachim and you're davening to Malachim. It's not something that you're supposed to do. Ramosha who brings in a tshuva that his father didn't say Barchuni L'Shalom. It comes, I think, already from Reb Chaim Volozhiner, from Kadmoinim. Barchuni L'Shalom. You don't ask a Malach to give you a bracha. What do you mean? Yaakov Avinu sounds like he's doing the same thing. Hamalach hagoya loisni mikol ra yivarech es hanarim. How do you clap these psukim over here? If you take a look at the Targum Yonason, this is the way the Targum Yonason learns up these two psukim. Uvarech yas Yosef. Yaakov bench Yosef. Amar, and he said, Hashem di yiflochu ahva hasi kadamai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whom my Zayd is worshipped. Avram v'Yitzchak. Hashem de'ezen yasi mid'isni ad yom ha'dain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has taken care of me from when I was born. Yehi rava kadamach. It's a tefillah now to Hashem. So, Yaakov is being maskir Shmoy Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and now he's davening. Yehi rava kadamach, the malacha dezamtent li lemifrak yasi mikol bisha, that the malach that you've given me throughout my life to take care of me, yivarech yas tolaya v'yiskrei ban shemi, that malach that you always sent to me, that malach should go and bestow bracha. Taka should bench the na'arim, but Yaakov is not talking to the Malach. Yaakov is talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a tefillah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ho'elikim. That Malach that you've always sent me, send that Malach, and that Malach should be Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. So it's a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avada, the subject of the bracha is the Malach is Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. That's what the words say. But it's not a request of the Malach to be Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. It's a request of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should send the Malach to go ahead and to be Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. So Avada, the Malach is being Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. But you're not talking to the Malach when you say a Malach HaGoy Lo Yisi Mikol Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. It's Yehira. You're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you take a look at the Archaim HaKadosh adds one beautiful line. It's a short paragraph. Vayomer Elokim, Hischelo Eirero Ahava Shel HaKadmonim. When Yaakov Avinu started this bracha, he started by being ma'orer the ahava of Avram and Yitzchak, the relationship that they had with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kiseder tefillah shmoyne esrei shemispalim. And this is in the Seder of Shmoyne Esrei that we daven. Shemaschilim bezichron avos. We always start mentioning the avos. This is a tefillah. It's a Yehei Rava. When a Yid tells the Shmoyne Esrei, what's the first thing we do? Elikei Avram, Elikei Yitzchak, Elikei Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu is saying a tefillah. It's Yehei Rava. Yehei Rava is Miloshin tefillah. So the tefillah starts the way every tefillah starts. Elokim ashes alchu avoisai lefanav Avram Yitzchak. Elokim aroya oisi. That's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So the three others are mentioned. The ahava of the others. Side the ahava they had to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Side the ahava HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to them. That's how he starts his tefillah. And what's the tefillah? That the malach that was goyel oisi mikol ra, he should be Yivarech Es HaNa'arim. Now this Inyan that Yaakov Avinu had a malach that was going loisimi kol ra. This was the first raid by the Parshas Vayishlach. Yaakov Avinu constantly has a malach. We said over at the time from the Brisker Rav that the reason Yaakov Avinu we find has the malach is because in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yaakov, Ushmarticha b'chol asher telech, Ushmarani b'derech hazeh. He had the special haftacha of Shmir al Yoino, and that's why Vayishlach Yaakov malachim mamish. That's why constantly Yaakov Avinu has malachim. It's because he was the one that was zoicha to have the malach. We added that it could be Yaakov Avinu was Damudah Torah, and Gemara is Gavriel, Michal, Rafal, and Ariel, and that's why he was zoicha to malachim. But the bottom line is, one thing's for sure, Yaakov Avinu is the one that was distinguished. He had the malach. And what Yaakov Avinu told Yosef was that the malach, Hagoyel Loisim Mikol Ra, that malach should be Yevarech Es HaNa'arim. What do the next words mean? V'yikari v'hem shemi, v'shem avoisai, Avram v'Yitzchak. So there's an important Even Ezra on this pasuk that we're going to get to Be'ezer Hashem. It got late early. We're not going to have an opportunity to talk about it today. We're going to get into that. But if you take a look at the Ramban says Pashnit. The Ramban says that the bracha was that your children should always be known as Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. They should always be discernible as being Yiddish Kindlech. They should always be different. All the brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Avos, that would be manifest through their offspring. My bracha to you, Yosef, is that your children should be zoicha to this inyan. And finally, v'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz, which literally means they should multiply. But v'yidgul arayv, just like the dogim shabiyam, the ayin hara is not shoylet on them, they should be exempt from ayin hara. We spoke out in the Chumash here and in the Daf, the niflidig chsam sofer, v'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz. We have a whole raid bite on these words. V'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz, 5 different pshatim from the Goyin and the Afla and different tzaddikim. But the bottom line is, v'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz. This was the bracha. So what was the bracha to Yosef? The bracha was that his children, because birchas abanim is kebirchas ha'ab, should have the malach hagoya loisim mikol ra. It should be nicker. V'yikari v'em shemi v'shem avoisa Avram v'Yitzchak. And v'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz. You go to a vachnach, you give a little child a bracha, you say a malach hagoy loisim mikol ra. It's helpful if we actually know what we're saying. This is the bracha. The bracha is Yaakov Avinu who was zoicha to have a malach hagoy loisim mikol ra. It's a tefillah, Yehi Rava Kadamach. That's how you start a malach. You turn to the Eibishter, you say Yehi Rava Kadamach. Yaakov Avinu had said that the malach hagoy loisim mikol ra yivarech saram. This kid should have shmir el yoina. He should be zoicha to the malach that Yaakov Avinu was zoicha to. V'yikari v'em shemi v'shem avoisai Avram v'Yitzchak. This should be a child, that it should be nicker on him. It should be nicker on him that he's a child of Avram v'Yitzchak and Yaakov. And v'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz. No ayin hara, shmira, should multiply. V'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz. The incredible bracha of a malach hagoyel. This was the bracha that Yaakov Avinu gave, who he gave Yosef. What was the bracha he gave Ephraim and Manasseh? So that's easy. The bracha there was b'chol yivarech Yisrael leimar yisumcha likim ke'Ephraim and Manasseh. Every Friday night, every Erev Kippur, mamish the Rabbi the Getzaitin, when parents give brachas to their children, they say yisumcha likim ke'Ephraim and Manasseh. This was the bracha of Yaakov Avinu, and this is a bracha that's loy meis. It's a bracha that's chai v'kayim, literally ad hayom hazeh. But just to end with one chsam sofer, and that is that Yaakov Avinu goes and he gives a bracha to Yosef. And what's the bracha to Yosef? In short, Hamalach hagoyel oisim mikol ra yivarech es hana'arim v'yikari v'em shemi v'shem avoisei Avram v'Yitzchak v'yidgul arayv bekerev haaretz. And all the Rishonim ask, I don't understand. That's not a bracha to Yosef. That's a bracha to Ephraim and Manasseh. And you see that Yaakov wanted to bench Ephraim and Manasseh. That's b'chol yivarech Yisrael le'emor yisimcha likim ke'Ephraim v'chem Manasseh. So what's the vayivarech es Yosef vayoymar Hamalach hagoyel loisi? So all the Rishonim say, like we mentioned already a few times, that birchas abanim is kebirchas ha'af. And you give a bracha to a person's children, you essentially just gave him a bracha. Because what does a parent want more? That he should have Yiddish anachis from his children. And as a result, this bracha that Yosef would be zoicha to Yiddish anachis, this is the spitz bracha that Yaakov Avinu could have given to Yosef. But Chsam Sofer ala Torah says another hergish. And we're going to end with this. The Gemara says, in Mesechtes Tainis, Daf Hey Amid Beis. The Gemara says, Rab Nachman and Rab Yitzchak have a yasvi de sudasa. Rab Nachman and Rab Yitzchak, they once sat down and they ate a suda together. And the Gemara says they had an exchange. It's actually Negeya, Yaakov, Avinu, Loy Meis, something that we're going to get to at the end of the parsha. But Kavi Mifter and Mahdadi, when the Suda was over and they got up to leave, Omar Le, Rab Nachman, Le Rab Yitzchak. So Rab Nachman turned to Rab Yitzchak and he told him, Levarchan Mar. Says, Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak, could you give me a bracha? So Rabbi Yitzchak turns to Rab Nachman, Omar Le, and he told him, you want a bracha? I'll give you a bracha and I'll explain it to you with a mashal. But there was a person that was traveling in the desert. Vayurayev, he was hungry. Vayechi, he was tired. Vitzameya, and he was thirsty. Umatza ilan, and all of a sudden he found a tree. This tree had all the milas in the world. It had sweet fruit. It had beautiful shade. And it even had an amasamayim. There was a stream of water that was going underneath it. So this person who was so hungry and thirsty and exhausted, he sat down and he ate from the fruit. He drank from the water. And he sat in its shade. When he was done eating and he rested up a little bit, he wanted to leave. Amar, so he turned to the tree and he said, Elon, Elon, he said, I want to give you a bracha. I want to be makatayv. What bracha should I give you? Should I tell you that your fruit should be sweet? I should give you a bracha that you should have a beautiful shade. I should give you a bracha you'll have an amasa mayim overes tachtecha. Elo, he said, I give you a bracha. My bracha is that every branch, everything that comes from you, you beautiful, perfect tree, you kamoischa should be like you. Af atas, Rabbi Yitzchak turned to Rav Nachman and he told him, you're asking me for a bracha? He said, what kind of bracha should I give you? In b'Torah, Rav Nachman, I should give you a bracha of Torah. Hare Torah, you're Rav Nachman. We can't move without Rav Nachman. In Kol Torah Kula. In ba'Oisher, he was chasna de Beinasiyah. Hare Oisher, you're so wealthy. In b'Banim, Rav Nachman. Hare Banim, you have children too. Ella, my bracha to you is that just like you have all these milas, your offspring should have these milas as well. So the Heilige Chassam Sofer said that Yaakov Avinu wanted to give a bracha to Yosef, and he looked at Yosef. He said, Yosef, he said, what bracha should I give you? In b'Torah, you have Torah. In ba'Oisher, you're the Mishnah Lamelech, Vayichalkel Yosef. In Bebanim, look at these children that you have. You have an Ephraim, you have a Menashe. He says, what kind of bracha do you want me to give you? He said, the only bracha I can give you is Vayevarech Yosef. My bracha is that Amalach HaGoyel Oisim Mikol Ra, Yevarech Es Hanaharim, that your children should be gebenched. V'yikorei v'ahem shemi v'shem avoisai Avram v'Yitzchak. And through them, you should have children that people are going to say, they're Bnei Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. V'yidgul aroi b'kerev aretz. To give Yosef a bracha was b'mei avarechacha. There was nothing to bench Yosef with. The bracha to Yosef, said the Heilige Chassam Sofer, was the bracha that Rabbi Yitzchak gave Rab Nachman in the Gemara Masechtas Tainis Tavei. The bracha was shekol netiyos sheyotzem mimcha yiu kamoischa. He said that's the only bracha that I can give you, Yosef.